She's chewing on her chewy bone thing. Alright, I'll leave you alone. Alright, so this video was requested by a few people on the last football video that I did. We had a comment by John Riley there that said, will you be reacting to the Premier League stadiums? And we also had one from Simon Davies that says, English Premier stadiums, please. I am still trying to learn how to say, is it Premier? 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 Is that it? That sounds right. Premier? I've been criticized because Americans apparently mispronounce it and we say premier because we put the emphasis on the last part of the word. I think the English, UK, put the emphasis on the front part of the word. Premier. 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 If I try to do it too many times, I screw it up. By the way, I have a team that I'm gonna be following them this season. I will give you a clue right now. They won on Saturday. I will let you know who they are pretty soon here. I hesitate to choose a team because it's gonna turn some people off probably from some of my football content because you guys are like serious about your teams over there. But I feel like I need a team to follow in order to really kind of like dig in and learn and understand and stuff, because if I keep it too general, it's really hard to just kind of keep up with all of that. So stadiums, oh by the way, Roger says hey. So I did kind of look up some stuff going into this video because I'm really ignorant of some of this stuff, like the stadiums. Some of these stadiums I think were featured on European stadiums that we did. Most of them were not. Now I did remember from that video that I had some people point out to me that the correct way to say it is stadia. That's how you would pronounce it in Latin. I don't know, do you guys say stadia in Latin? You have the singular and the plural, right? Stadium or stadium. And then we have stadia. This is a second declension neuter noun, hence the endings here. But the Latin term actually comes from the Greek term, which means race course. There is another meaning, but I think race course is probably the one that they, derived the word from. Apparently, like, it's really common in the English language to just say stadiums. It's kind of like accepted, and it tends to be more in like the academic circles and stuff where they would say stadia. I also looked up, because for some weird reason, I mistakenly thought that there was like 30 something teams in the league, but I did look it up and there are 20 teams with 20 stadiums. I looked up also, so Brentford, which is located in London, is the smallest stadium with about 17K. Then we have, of course, Manchester United, which is in Manchester, has about 74K, slightly bigger, and they're also the largest stadium. I also was curious about who the largest, like the big teams are in the league, because I didn't really have a good handle on that, and I learned that there is a big four, which happens to be Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea, and Liverpool. I would have expected that Man United would have been one of the big ones because they're the most popular, I feel like, from the league, and they're the ones that we hear the most about over here in the States. And honestly, before I started like watching these videos, I wasn't really aware of any of these three. I had gotten the feeling that Chelsea was one of the top ones from a lot of your comments. I was not aware that Arsenal and Liverpool were also up there. Alright, so without further ado, let's check out these stadiums. It'll be interesting to see which one I gravitate to. I tend to like newer modern stadiums, so I've already done a video on Tottenham, so if you want to check that out, I'll have the link up here for you guys. Anyway, it was just like a tour of the stadium and kind of the history of it and stuff like that. It was really interesting. I do like the Tottenham stadium. It is definitely like top-notch stadium, definitely modern, so I know automatically I'm gonna like that one, but it'll be interesting to see if any of these others kind of capture my eye too. I know that even the smaller stadiums can be very, very special because of like the history and the tradition of them, and it's not necessarily just like the size and the amenities that make a stadium special. I don't have any personal connection to any of these stadiums, so I'm just going on with it looks good from afar. All right, so let's go ahead and let's check these out.
The Premier League needs no introduction. So I'll instead use that time to say, we'll be going through at least the top 4 tiers of English football. So if you support one of those clubs and have an interesting fact or just a little tidbit about your stadium, I'd love to hear them. So please let me
What does he mean by the top 4 tiers of English football?
know in the comments. Anyway, let's get into the stadiums. We start off with Emirates Stadium, home to Arsenal. It's one of only a handful of Premier League stadiums built this millennium, and the design certainly reflects that. It's reminiscent of Estádio da Luz in Lisbon. After all, it was designed by the same firm. The interior is almost identical. It's made up of 4 tiers of bowl seating with the top tier undulating, which is kinda cool.
I like the red seats.
Although I don't often talk about atmosphere, the Emirates is often called the library by away fans, which tells you everything you need to know. But it's certainly a great looking stadium. Oh, come on. You shush.
What are are the fans just like, they don't make a lot of noise? Is that what the deal is?
Villa Park, home to Aston Villa. If I wasn't already familiar with the stadium, I'd swear that Villa Park was the name of a housing estate. But no, it's definitely a stadium. It has more of a traditional design than the last one, with 4 individual stands that have slowly conjoined over time. And some of those stands, particularly this one, have a beautiful brick facade. On the inside, the seats are done up in the club's colour.
Hang on, what? Oh, those are steps. I thought that they were like seats outside the stadium. The picture's a little distorted, so that's what it looked like. Also, what is Holt End? What does that mean?
Beautiful brick facade. On the inside, the seats are done up in the club's colours of claret and sky blue. After all, they were the first to wear it, and it has since become a very popular choice for other clubs. The Amex, home to Brighton and Hove Albion. It was built a little way out of the centre of Brighton and Hove, in a village called Farmer. The stadium features a very distinctive sloping roof canopy that almost slopes all the way down to the ground behind each goal.
You know what, it almost has like the shape of an American football. That's what I was thinking looking at it.
This is partially due to the disparity in size between the different stands. And it looks pretty good as well.
Rugby, oh, it slopes like that too.
The interior is also quite visually striking. It just looks very spick and span. It's a great little stadium, this one. Turf Moor, home to Burnley. It is arguably the most simple of the Premier League stadiums. But some would say that's a good thing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that's a Bob the Builder quote. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's made up of 4 completely separate stands. No frills, but it gets the job done. One thing I really like about it is that due to the stands on the west and the south being considerably smaller, it offers those sitting higher up in the other stands a pretty decent view of the surrounding hills and Burnley itself, which
cool.
I believe they call the Venice of the North.
One thing I'm noticing is that a lot of these stadiums that are not covered completely, or not indoor stadiums, do have the covering on the stands, and that's not something you typically see in stadiums over here when they're just strictly outdoor stadiums. So that's a big difference, I think, between these stadiums that I'm seeing here and what I'm kind of used to over here in the States. Stamford Bridge, isn't this Chelsea? I think I remember that. Yeah. Oh, can't even see their logo up there.
Stamford Bridge, home to Chelsea. Out of the so-called Big Six clubs' stadiums, Stamford Bridge is the smallest. It is, however, the biggest stadium in Fulham, rather than Fulham's, and it's currently the oldest Premier League stadium.
Really?
In those 140 odd years, it has hosted basically every sport under the sun.
That's so... It has to have had some renovations because that does not look 140 years old. It looks way more modern than that. I don't know. I don't think they would have... I was thinking about like these walkways, these like tower walkways like this, but I mean, 140 years ago they probably wouldn't build stuff like that. I don't know. But like all of this looks very modern.
Every sport under the sun, even greyhound racing. On that note, why is it always greyhounds? I'd love to see a pug race. Anyway, Chelsea have well and truly made the stadium their own since the days of the greyhounds, particularly on the inside where it's very Chelsea. Yeah, not too shabby. They do have a rather spectacular upgrade planned, but that won't be for a little while.
That was pretty cool. The other thing I noticed that's different between these stadiums and the ones over here are that you guys put the name of the team or something in the seats, logo, name of the team, whatever. I don't know, you don't really see that over here.
Selhurst Park, home to Crystal Palace. In some ways it's a shame that Crystal Palace aren't one of the bigger clubs, because the potential for a stadium for a club named Crystal Palace is immense. If you're unfamiliar, the nearby area in which the club used to play is named Crystal Palace, after the incredible building that went by the same name. That was unbelievably built in 1851, and a big budget stadium inspired by the Crystal Palace would be freaking incredible. Maybe one day, but for now, Selhurst Park is adequate. It's very old-fashioned. I mean, two of the stands still have those obstructive support pillars holding up the roof, but I like that old-fashioned charm.
That is kind of cool looking though, I have to admit that, yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just got that kind of like small old-fashioned charm, like you said. Oh, Crystal Palace. Where is that? I've never heard, I've heard of the team Crystal Palace. I didn't know there was an actual Crystal Palace though. I've never heard of that. Is that in this area?
Up the roof, but I like that old-fashioned charm. Goodison Park, home to Everton. Famously, this ground was built after Everton moved out of Anfield, and it has since hosted more top-flight football than any other ground in the country, so that's good. But the move out of Anfield did spawn their arch enemies. Goodison Park is a good-looking ground, and it's loved by many. However, it is aging. As you can see, once again there are those support pillars on some of the stands, which obviously isn't ideal. So the grand old lady hasn't got too many years left, as Everton will be moving to what seems to be an absolute beauty of a stadium.
Holy cow.
Hopefully they take the atmosphere along with them.
I want to see the inside of that. Is that also going to be in Everton? I forgot to look at the city. That was cool looking, especially on the water. I'll have to come back and look at these once they're upgraded, because I might have to change my opinion on which stadium I like the best.
Elland Road, home to Leeds United. It's not too dissimilar to the last one, from the bird's eye view at least. And it too has some outdated design elements, such as, yet again, pillars supporting the roof in some sections. But after consolidating their position in the Premier League, the plans to upgrade and expand the stadium to a capacity of around 55,000 seem likely to go ahead. Interestingly, Elland Road was originally known as the old Peacock Ground.
Why does it say stand?
Named after the adjacent pub. And I've got to say, they should have kept that name instead of naming it after a road.
Revy's...
The old Peacock Ground.
Revy's stand?
I like it. King Power Stadium, home to Leicester City. It's been 5 years since they pulled off the unthinkable, and I'm glad to see that the wheels haven't fallen off since then. Given Leicester's relative success, their stadium remains quite humble, but they are planning an expansion. I don't think any design is set in stone, but it could end up looking like Cardiff City Stadium, which is no bad thing, but hopefully they go for something a bit different. The stadium's current design is far from being something a bit different. There are quite a few stadiums in England that look very similar, in particular one that's coming up later in the video. The interior is just a simple single-tier bowl, but it looks fine.
Pretty average stadium, I guess.
Anfield, home to Liverpool, the club that was formed when Everton moved out. It was a prudent decision to name the club Liverpool. It could be a small reason behind the club's popularity in Liverpool. It just casts a broader net than the name Everton. But winning helps with the popularity as well. Anfield has one of the best looking stands in the world. I am of course speaking of the main stand, particularly the exterior. It's modern, but the facade is mostly made of brick, so it looks fairly traditional at the same time. And on top of that, literally, the roof canopy is fairly unique. It kinda looks like the brim of a baseball cap or something.
You know, a lot of European stadiums also have just like, they have this like, I don't know, frame, like all of these kind of frame type things on the roof. I don't know what they're called. But I mean, almost every single stadium has that, which, I don't know, must be a European thing because I'm not used to seeing stuff like that generally on American stadiums. I don't know if there's a purpose to it or if it's just kind of like the general style of architecture for like football stadiums over in Europe. But if you guys know why that sort of design is used over there versus and why it's not used over here very much, let me know. Also, the covers on the stands, is that just because there's a lot of rain that happens in England?
Unique. It kinda looks like the brim of a baseball cap or something. The rest of the stadium is a little more typical, but also pretty darn good.
Didn't show the inside very much.
Etihad Stadium, home to Manchester City. This one has a short history, but a unique history. It was originally built for the 2002 Commonwealth Games, but it was always going to be converted into a football stadium afterwards and was designed as such. The stadium's most unique feature would have to be the cable-supported roof canopy that's held up by these masts that surround the stadium.
I was wondering what those were
The cables
for.
kind of look like giant harps. I wonder if you could play them. What do you know? It's a bit out of tune, but not bad. The interior is made up of a double-tiered bowl structure, plus a separate tier of seating on 3 out of 4 sides of the ground.
That's a nice looking stadium.
And not too far away is Old Trafford, home to Manchester United. Although the name Old Trafford isn't referring to the ground itself, it is true, it's quite old. And it's showing its age in some areas. But nevertheless, it's the biggest and arguably the most famous Premier League stadium.
So, is that what all of this stuff is for? Is roof support? Then? Is that literally what this is doing, is holding up the roof? I guess because they don't have the support columns, they took those out. But yeah, I guess that's what it is then.
I said arguably, okay? Let's just get that clear. The exterior consists of a lot of brick and glass, which looks great. But something Old Trafford is especially known for are those inclined roofs, which give the stadium a unique look on the outside, but on the inside it sort of blacks out and blocks off the upper seating. Particularly on the Sir Alex Ferguson stand. And there's something about that that has to add to the intimidating atmosphere. The fear of the unknown, I guess. Feyenoord's
Manchester United might be more popular than Manchester City, but Manchester City Stadium blows theirs out of the park.
De Kuip has a similar situation. Kinda like it.
See, they don't have the stuff holding up the roof there.
St James's Park, home to Newcastle United, the northernmost Premier League team. For some reason, I really like the slightly unusual asymmetrical design of this stadium. This was done because, as you can probably see, there's a shortage of available land on 2 sides of the stadium. So they simply didn't have room to expand further. The additional seating had to be put on the other sides, causing this lopsided design that we have here. Other than that, the design isn't too unusual. Just like Crystal Palace, they could have really played off the team's name and made a new castle-like exterior, like what you see on many college football stadiums. But then, once the castle's been around a while, it becomes an old castle, so it would be irrelevant.
Okay.
Carrow Road, home to Norwich City. After 4 big boys in a row, we're back to something a little more modest. It's not like they can spend a load of money on a huge stadium, they're not rich. But they don't need a big stadium anyway, this one is perfectly fine. It's actually one of my favourite of the smaller stadiums, but I don't know why exactly. Maybe it's simply just those yellow and green seats. They really stand out when watching it on TV. It was particularly noticeable in the last couple of seasons without any fans. Oh, and there's actually a hotel hidden somewhere in the stadium as well.
What?
Which is kinda cool, but where is it? Oh, that's gotta be it.
Oh, it's a Holiday Inn. I'm not a huge fan of like yellow, honestly. So like the yellow-green combo, I've just never been a huge fan of that. But I can see why some people like it.
St Mary's Stadium, home to Southampton. It's the red version of the King Power Stadium. Although I shouldn't say that, I should say the King Power is the blue version of St Mary's. Because it actually did come first, by a grand total of 1 year. I don't know what else to say, it's just the same as the KP really. I guess there's probably some good fish and chips nearby. That water right next door is technically a river, but the sea is right over there.
Okay. You know what? I do like the contrast of the red and the green a lot better than the yellow. I don't know, for some reason the red just looks better to me personally. I like it better.
There's probably some good fish and chips nearby. That water right next door is technically a river, but the sea is right over there. Let's just move on.
Oh,
Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, home to... oh, darn it. I forgot. For a couple of years, it was the newest Premier League stadium. But as you'll see later on, another team has put an end to that. It still has to be the flashiest stadium in the league, and arguably in Europe.
I like the dark
Although
seats.
I don't think there is an official flashiness index to go by. But just look at that. I don't often say this about a stadium, but it's a sexy stadium. I mean...
The only thing that I think could be better with it is the jumbo... I don't know if you call them jumbotrons or not. We call them that here. But the screens are kind of small for the stadium.
Look at that giant cock rule up there on the roof. A golden cock rule is amongst the most sought after stadium features. But a more useful feature that I particularly like is the south stand. That's just one big wall of seats. The interior is definitely better than the exterior though. Don't get me wrong, it looks great. But it also looks like... yeah.
I didn't think of that.
Vicarage Road, home to Watford. On the surface, the Vic doesn't look too far out of the ordinary. It's a fairly typical ground made up of 4 individual stands, with one stand that is particularly built up. But perhaps the most peculiar thing about this stadium is that one of the stands is named after Elton John. Sir Elton John, I should say. He is of course a Watford supporter, and formerly the major shareholder, president and chairman.
Oh.
But forget about that.
I didn't know that.
I've just learned that for a brief period in the early 90s, this place was home to Wealdstone FC, which means that the Wealdstone Raider has most likely been here before. Forget about Elton John, his fame pales in comparison to the great man.
I don't know, that must be I don't know who that is.
London Stadium. One of the most generic names imaginable. It's the home of West Ham United. West Ham have one-upped Manchester City's Commonwealth Games Stadium and gone with the former Olympic Games Stadium. But by no means does it mean it's a better ground. It is actually a much maligned stadium. It looks alright to be fair, but I don't think the aesthetics are the main issue. Although from an Olympics perspective, it followed from Beijing's Bird Nest Stadium, which is a far more interesting design.
Whoa, that's cool.
But the disdain for London Stadium has probably to do with the fact that it's a bit soulless, and many of the seats are quite far from the action. And a lot of fans weren't too pleased with the move to begin with, regardless of what the stadium was like.
I was gonna say, like, I liked the outside round. It looks, I like symmetry and stuff, so like seeing the round was kind of cool. But yeah, inside, it's just, soulless is a very good word for it. Like, especially like this up here. It just seems like it takes up an unnecessarily, like it's as tall as the stands are. It just looks out of proportion. I don't know. Doesn't do much, does it?
But relatively speaking, in the grand scheme of the entire world, it's still a fine stadium. Molineux Stadium, home to the Wolverhampton Wanderers. You've gotta love a bit of alliteration. Wonderful wording. The stadium's exterior is done up in a rather unusual colour. Parts of it are like a yellowish cream, with some hits of brown. I wasn't alive in the 70s, obviously, but I feel like you would see a lot of these colours working in an office in the 70s. Manila folders, old-fashioned computing devices, as well as that fake wooden furniture and brown clothing and all that stuff.
That's one reason why I'm not a huge, as far as like decades go, I'm much more of a fan of the 60s than the 70s, because 70s just is blah.
Stuff. I'm making it sound bad, but I actually quite like it. Not the 70s office, the exterior.
Like the wolf.
It sets it apart from the other stadiums. Not that it wasn't already a bit different with that French-sounding name. Another thing that sets it apart are the curved stands on the side of the pitch. Usually stadiums that are made up of 4 individual stands don't have that. It just allows for a better viewing angle for those sitting on the sides.
You know what though, this yellow, though, I kind of like it. I think it's only because there's black kind of balancing it out. I think if it was all yellow, I wouldn't like it as much. But with the black added in, with the green, like that color scheme is okay. And
the last cab off the rank is Brentford Community Stadium, home of the Brentfords. This one definitely doesn't look vintage. Like I alluded to earlier, it's the newest stadium in the Premier League, having had the misfortune of opening in the year 2020.
I like it, kind of looks sci-fi-ish.
This place is absolutely stunning. Just look at the sharp angles of the roof canopy.
Yeah, I like it.
Magnificent. The first time I mentioned this stadium on the channel, I noted that it was squoze between railway tracks on all sides. The distance between the tracks and the stadium is so minute, you might even say it's a bee's dick.
Wait, no, you can't say that.
What?
Bee's dick, you can't say that.
Now there's a big screen.
Why the hell not?
Well, you've already made the joke about the cockerel. I let that one slide. But you can't make 2 jokes about a gentleman's sausage in the same video. It's British law, innit?
Yeah, I know about the law. I didn't know a bee's dick counted as a gentleman's sausage.
Yeah, well, it's a bit ambiguous, but it's just not worth the risk, mate. Trust me.
Alright, fine. Well, anyway, it's a great stadium. One of my favourite small stadiums going round. Beestick, 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 beestick.
Oh, you are an absolute.
And those were the 2021-22 Premier League stadiums.
Okay, I didn't realize that there were dates on this, so maybe I should have watched the current year one. I don't know if there's any difference. If there are like new stadiums that I should check out for this current year coming up, let me know, and I'll watch that video. I enjoyed that. I enjoy looking at the different stadiums and stuff. I think I figured out what the roof frame thingies were to hold up the roof that's covering the stands. It didn't click until he was talking about them he's talking about like looking like harp strings. When he pointed that out, I was like, oh, that must be what all that stuff is. And because also the frames are also connected to the outside of the stadium as well, almost crane-like it was holding up the roof. So I guess that's what they're for. Yeah, we don't have, like I said, we don't have those roof covers over here so much. There are maybe a handful of stadiums that have similar coverage like that, but they're not common at all. Yeah, I think the top stadium remains Tottenham for me. It's just, I like the outside of it and I like the inside of it. I really like the dark seats. It's just a really good design and, you know, top notch as far as like the tech goes, amenities and all of that stuff. Of the smaller stadiums though, I did like the Crystal Palace one. I liked that charm that it had. The other small stadium I really liked was the same as the guy that does this video, Brentford. I really like that stadium as well. I like the design. Like, I'm big on like modern design, so, and I like that the stadiums had like little colored seats peppered in as well. That was pretty cool looking, and it was unique with the train tracks going right next to it. It almost looked like it would hit the stadium. You know, the train cars would like hit the outside of that stadium because it was kind of like hanging over the track just slightly. It looked like, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was just the weird angle I was looking at, but I really liked like I said, it was almost sci-fi-ish with like the sharp angles, slopes. You know, the American football season is coming up here, particularly like I like college football. I don't really watch the NFL. The college stadiums are the biggest stadiums that we have over here in the States, and I know he has videos on his channel, The Wide World of Stadiums, that cover basically stadiums all around the world, so we might hit up some American ones and have a look at those, which might be interesting to some of you over in Europe who may not be familiar with them at all. So you can kind of like compare them with the stadiums that you have and just kind of see what some of the differences are. It's just really interesting seeing a lot of the differences with the European stadiums. Not necessarily worse or better, just different, you know? And it's kind of cool seeing that. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Social media, I have all of this social media right here, and you can find the links to all of it down below. And also Patreon, I have all of this stuff you see here on Patreon, so a lot of videos over there waiting for you to go watch. I don't put them up here on YouTube, so a lot of other content over there if you're interested in any of this stuff as well. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. So Roger and I thank you guys for watching as always. We'll have more football content coming up. I will be letting you know which team I'm following this season pretty soon as well. So stay tuned for all of that, and we will see you next time.